guys, I welcome you all into this session number one of Oracle SOA training. So I am your trainer. My name is Sumit Agarwal, and I have an overall of experience of around 10 years in integration industry, and I have got exposure to products like Oracle SOA Suite very extensively, then OSB, Dell Boomi, MuleSoft, Jitterbit, ICS, right? So what we'll do is we'll quickly get started with today's agenda. So guys, I have a tendency to type in the notepad, and I still work in a fashion like how old school teachers do, right? I typically treat every one of you as laymen to get started with, and you might be an enterprise architect somewhere, an architect, but then when you are part of my session, I have certain rules and regulations and some of the requests, right? So at first, I want everyone to make sure that you are joining the session consistently. And if you're doing so, I can guarantee you that you will be expert in SOA once you complete this training. You start your interaction with some architects and you will find that you have a good amount of knowledge to add to the discussion, right? So a consistency from your side and myself is required. That is point number one. That is the foremost important thing. Let's try to make these sessions more interactive. You ask me 10 questions, I might be able to answer 8 or 9, but then I'll go back and I'll do my homework and come up with the answer of remaining questions. So it should not be a one-way communication. This is my humble request. Try to ask as much questions you can, and if you see my recordings, typically I make sure that I answer each and every question, right? I understand most of you come from Oracle ERP background. Some of you might be from Oracle apps, and there are people from ODI background. So I will start with some very basic SOA because I have seen people with 5 to 8 years experience, but then if you ask them to define SOA, they cannot do it. They cannot explain it. It's not that they do not understand it, but then how to put in words is what matters a lot for me, right? So we'll go with the basic content and gradually we'll ramp up and we'll start taking the more complex scenarios also. So the prerequisite for this training would be XML, and now with REST gaining a lot of market, it would be we will be touching JSON also for sure, right? So we'll start with XML, JSON. No knowledge of Java is required. So a lot of people come from different backgrounds and are hesitant to join this training because they feel that Java is pretty much required, which is not the case. So I am myself not an expert on Java. So if you do not know Java, need not to bother. These all things are going to be covered within my training. So the only good intent and the focus is required. Rest I will take care. Right? Hey, so guys, let's get started. Do you have any questions before I get started with today's agenda?
No.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start with SOA. So guys, SOA stands for Service Oriented Architecture, right? As I just sometime back mentioned that it is a concept given by open group. So there were people from Cisco, IBM who gathered together and came up with this concept. Okay, and this concept, it is basically a loosely coupled architecture. So the idea to bring this architecture is to introduce loosely coupled integration. So let's first understand what is the meaning of loosely coupled, right? So loosely coupled would mean that when there are two entities who need to talk to each other, but then it has to happen with a minimal dependency on the existence of two entities at the very same time, right? So I'll give you an example. So let's say you send me a courier, right? I am based in India. You guys might be based in US, and you send me a courier, and there are some instructions that you that the letter might be carrying some confidential data. Then the instruction to the courier team is that it should be handed over to the same person for whom it is intended, right? So in that case, what happens is my availability becomes a mandate. So the courier guy needs to come and he needs to look over for me. And if I'm not available, if I'm engaged, if I'm out of station, so that message which comes from a source party who is residing in US to a party who is residing in India cannot be transferred because there is a tight coupling. The message can be only transferred when the recipient party is available at that moment, right? So this kind of mechanisms definitely stand good for our IT industry also. So whenever we are working for an enterprise, right? If you look for any medium or big size enterprises, they will they will have different LOBs, and in each LOBs they may have different systems to maintain to run their business in a seamless fashion. They might be using some CRM systems, some BRM systems. They might be having some web applications, some portals, some mobile applications, then some core applications like SAP based ERPs or Oracle E-Business Suite, Oracle Fusion applications, right? So there can some HRMS systems. So there can be different systems, and now these applications cannot live in silo, right? If it happens, so the true value out of the data which is being generated cannot be driven out. So let's say if I generate a new account in a CRM, I would want that account data to be available in my uh, financial management system as well. Enterprise would not want to generate the same data by spending some more effort in the subsequent systems, because if we manually do that, first of all it is time consuming. Second thing is there are chances where we get the data inconsistency, right? It might happen at one place. You might uh, write something like Infosys Technologies Private Limited, where private is PVT. Another place you might write private limited as PRIAVATE limited. So the point I'm trying to say is the need is some source of truth which is generated in one application, let it be a custom portal or a CRM or some mobile application. The same data needs to flow to other respective applications, right? So that's where comes the need of integration, right? So why do we need to integrate? We need to integrate because there are different applications which are part of the enterprise where some data or information exchange has to happen. Now, how this integration and SOA are related to each other, that's what we need to understand, right? I told SOA is an architecture, and what kind of architecture it is? It is a loosely coupled architecture. Loosely coupled would mean that the dependency among the systems which are required to be integrated has to be minimal. So now let's first understand what is integration. So integration is the process of collaboration. It is the process of connecting two or more applications or system in an enterprise. In our generic term, it is the process of collaborating two or more entities, right? And why there is a need of collaboration? Because we need to exchange some sort of information from one application to another, right? So now what happens is, let's say there is an application A which is a CRM, and there is another application, or I have got a data warehouse, right? So I want that whatever new data is getting generated in CRM, there might be some master data like my account details, some contacts. I want those to be frequently synchronized with my data warehouse, okay, which might be some, let's say, SQL server, right? So now what happens is, typically, if I go 10 to 15 years back, how even today some of the enterprises, how are they, achieving this requirement is, so they do it in a P2P fashion, which is also called as point to point integration. So what do we mean by point to point integration? This is also called as tightly coupled integration. What that would mean is that your CRM can talk to data warehouse for sure, and vice versa, but then it happens in a point to point integration fashion, which would mean that CRM needs to write some custom code at its end to convert the messages which are produced by CRM in a format which is understood by data warehouse, and similarly something is required at data warehouse end to make this integration possible. So now this kind of integration looks awesome when you have lesser number of enterprises, or sorry, lesser number of systems within an enterprise. So let's say I have just started up a new company, and then I may have one or two applications. The rest of the work I do manage manually. Then those kind of things look good, because uh, you know you need not to spend some additional money to get some intermediator. But then what happens is, this has got some drawbacks, right? First of all, the biggest drawback is that the dependency of the system is very high, right? So let's say there is a message coming from CRM which is intended to be passed on to the data warehouse, and somehow the data warehouse is not available. it is some maintenance activities going on there, and your database, underlying database, has been shut down, right? So then what happens is whatever message is coming from the CRM, that is going to be lost, and the CRM needs to resubmit that message, right? So, and that is one thing. Second thing is, as my systems in an enterprise grows, so let's say I add additional system, something, let's say maybe finance, some financial modules of ERP to do the billing and all, then in that case, what happens is, to have the integration with your financials management system, CRM again needs to write some custom code at their end, and same has to happen with financials. So the first of all, there is a lot of additional overhead is required as each individual application end to make this integration possible. And the next thing is, these people who are owning the CRM applications or financials applications, uh, they, instead of focusing on their core functionality, need to spend a lot of time in the integration aspects, and then this code becomes bulky, and we reach to a stage where the maintenance of the code becomes very tough, right? And since these are tightly coupled, then the chances are very high that if one of the systems within this whole network of application breaks, then it might start impacting your complete order fulfillment process. So let's say there is an order which starts from point A, and when it traverses to point B, C, D, E, and F, so on, and if the point B or C breaks, it will start impacting your complete order life cycle, and hence it starts impacting your business heavily. So that is where the need comes, that where we need to bring some middleman who is able to handle this job of integrating these applications with location transparency. So CRM should not be bothered whether data warehouse is available, whether the financial system is available or not, what is the location of the data warehouse, what is the format which data warehouse understands. So those all information should make no matter to the CRM whenever it wants to exchange some message, right? Even if some new system is getting added, right, that should not start bothering the CRM team to start writing some additional code, and that's where the need comes of a loosely coupled integration. Yeah. So this integration has been happening for decades now. So there are different ways. Even maybe when I was not even born, maybe people were doing something. There are some traditional ways of doing it. People use RPC, RMI, Corba. So they write a lot of some Java custom code. But then now, as we are getting more mature, right? So there comes a need of an middleware platform, okay, or I would rather call it as an integration platform, which will facilitate this integration, which acts as a middleman among the different applications within an enterprise, right? So what is going to happen is, if I don't want to do this tightly coupled integration, because we understand that these applications are completely dependent on each other's availability. Second thing is, a lot of custom code is required to be written. Third thing is, this becomes like a mess of looks more like a mess of wires as your number of system grows, because let's say your data warehouse needs to get connected with the financial system, so a lot of custom code is required to be added at the financial sense for CRM and for data warehouse and vice versa. So maintenance of this code is very very tough, and we eventually lose the focus on the actual CRM capabilities or the financials capability, and that is where enterprises realize that there is a need of some middleman who can overtake this, or who can take these responsibilities and reduce this overhead of integration, and each individual application or a system should have its focus on its core functionality itself, right? So if, let's say, I introduce that middleman, so how it is going to look is, I may have CRM as is, then there will be some middleware, yeah, and then I may have similarly data warehouse. Now middleware is a bigger term, right? So within middleware, typically I have my platform which facilitates integration. I may have the application servers where I run it. I may have some BPM applications. I may have, like, if I talk in Oracle term, even ADF falls into middleware, even Web Center falls into middleware. But then there is there is another subset of this which is called as integration. So a lot of people are confused between middleware and integration, and they use these terms exchangeably. This might sound true for some scenarios, but then I would say middleware is a superset and integration is subset of it. Okay, middleware might be facilitating integration, but then it is not the only thing it might do. Okay, so now here, what is going to happen with this integration platform? This integration platform has the intelligence to do validations, enrichments, transformations, orchestrations, routing, mediation. Uh, it will facilitate asynchronous communication. It will have the capability to do the uh, retry mechanisms and so on. So there are a lot of capabilities with this integration platforms come up with, and what would happen is whenever any enterprise gets a new application for some specific purpose, then those applications need to just make sure that they get integrated with some middleware, and middleware is going to do it in a very I would say platform software and hardware neutral manner. So these applications which are newly getting added. So let's say a financial systems get added. So that financial system need not to write any code, any custom code to integrate with data warehouse or CRM separately. So whatever is the message format which is produced by financial system, that it needs to pass it on to the middleware or an integration system, and then integration system will accept that message, it will intercept that message, and is going to do the necessary transformations to convert into a format which is understood by either CRM, data warehouse, or any other system. So I typically give an example in my sessions, like integration system is like a wedding planner. Yeah, it is like a wedding planner. So let's say I'm planning for a wedding for my brother, right? And like I might be very busy, or I may not have very good contacts at a particular place where the wedding is required to be organized, right? So what happens is there is an organizer, right, who realizes that there are n number of things which are required to be taken care of to organize the wedding, right? So he might have a requirement of a decor. He might have a requirement of a, what we say, what is required, some logistics are required to be taken care for your guests. Then n number of things might be there, right? So then one way of doing it is that organizer has a contract with all these people separately, right? So I am the organizer. I will go to decor and I will have a contract with him. I will sign a contract. Then similarly, I will go to the logistics. Then there may be some catering service which is required. I'll go to the caterers and I will arrange things. Then there might be a venue, right? There might be some farmhouse or a banquet hall where I need to host the wedding. I might need to have a separate contract with those people. So that becomes a lot of cumbersome thing to do, right? There is a lot of overhead I have. So I need to, so this is more like writing a custom contract, or you can compare it with a custom code, right? So this is like point to point integration. You are contacting each service provider separately, right? And then it is time consuming. So what you do is, now this is the traditional way we were doing in our day-to-day life also, right? And even in many parts of the world, this is the same tradition which is being followed. But then now there are some specialists like who are really good in that domain. Those people are called as wedding planners. So what I will do is I will visit a wedding planner and I would say that these are my n number of requirements, which can be compared with a message coming from a source application which is required to be passed to n number of different applications. I would say that these are the n number of services I need, and this is my budget, this is the day, and all those stuff. I will load that information to wedding planner, and then wedding planner will establish the contract with decors, logistics, and so on. So by spending some few extra bucks, I might end up releasing a lot of pressure at my end, and it makes my life easy. Same thing stands good in the enterprise, IT enterprise also. So what happens is these integration layer will definitely add some extra bucks to your complete IT budget, but then it makes everything in a more agile manner, in a more loosely coupled manner, and you have a better control over your whole enterprise architecture. If any new system is required to be added, you need not to bother much. If some of the system is failing, it may not still impact the complete order fulfillment, and even if it impacts to an extent, so you always have a way to control it. You have a better control over it than what you had in point to point integrations. Now we understand that integration, what is integration, how the integration was happening traditionally, and now how that integration has to happen with a loosely coupled product or a middleware layer. Now where does SOA fit in over here? So this middleware products, right? So there were a lot of different mechanisms of implementing it. So this started with a hub and spoke model. It might have started then even before that, but then until the since the time I have been reading it, I have been working on it. It started from hub and spoke model, and now then gradually it started moving to ESB. Then we have now iPaaS, API led, and so on. But then when this integration has to happen, it has to follow certain architecture, right? So so whenever we are implementing some product, right, there has to be some architecture on which it has to be based. So that is where this middleware products, right, lot of middleware products leverages service oriented architecture. This service oriented architecture facilitates the integration of these discrete applications in a very loosely coupled, agile, or a flexible manner, right? So what exactly is service oriented architecture? So there are two key pillars of service oriented architecture, which are services and messages. So if at all you are working on a product which is implementing service oriented architecture, right? So service oriented architecture itself is not a product or a tool. It is implemented by different vendors like Oracle, IBM, TIPCO, MuleSoft, Dell Boomi. There are n number of players in the market right now. So this architecture has been implemented by these different IT giants, and they came up with their own products. So for example, Oracle came up with a product called as Oracle SOA Suite. Yes. So now, like, we are here to focus more on Oracle stack, right? So now what happened is, like, long back Oracle came up with something called as Oracle Fusion, right, which is also called as Oracle Fusion Applications, which is there to facilitate the all your ERP needs to manage your enterprises more effectively. I'm not so good with the functional knowledge of ERP and all, but then Oracle introduced Oracle Fusion, and within Oracle Fusion we had two things: Oracle Fusion Applications and Oracle Fusion Middleware. So this Oracle Fusion applications were internally built on the top of Oracle Fusion Middleware, which facilitates the integration of these different uh, applications or modules within Oracle Fusion applications with one another and with these third parties. And your Oracle SOA is part of Oracle Fusion middleware, right? So Oracle Fusion, if I say there is Oracle Fusion within which I have Oracle Fusion applications, Oracle Fusion middleware, and within Oracle Fusion middleware I have got Oracle SOA, where service oriented architecture has been implemented to facilitate the integration, right? So if it's only a matter of integration, we have got ODI also, right? But then it may not be based on service oriented architecture. We have many products under Oracle Fusion middleware. We have got ADF, we have got Web Center, we have got OSB, right? So there are there are others. I would say, etc. But we may have 10 to 15 different offerings within Oracle Fusion Middleware itself. And now we are here on a small piece of Oracle Fusion Middleware, Oracle SOA Suite, which is giant in itself, right? So if I keep on speaking for 100 hours also, then I may not be able to cover Oracle SOA completely. But that is how the hierarchy looks like. So now coming back to the fact, I was saying that SOA is all about services and messages, right? Now, what are these services and messages? Let's understand this, right? So what does this architecture say is anything you want to implement, visualize it in terms of services. For example, if I talk about object-oriented programming, right? So there, what happens is you have a problem statement, you visualize it in terms of objects, then objects may have some member variables and member methods, and these objects may talk to each other. Similarly, when we are working on service-oriented architecture, each of your solution has to be in terms of services. So what is the service? It is the logical encapsulation of some self-contained. So some spelling mistakes might be there when I'm typing it. Please excuse me for that. Uh, so it is a logical encapsulation of some self-contained business functionality. It can be a functionality like addition of two numbers, right? It can be a functionality like inserting data into database. It can be a functionality like validating the credentials of an user and so on. So idea is that this provides you some, you understand some business use case, you implement it, and that is nothing but service. So for me, like service is more like a concept of function we have in C language, right? It is like a method in Java, right? And messages, what does messages represent? It represents the data which is exchanged among the services. So when you're working on service-oriented architecture or any product which leverages service-oriented architecture, there eventually everything is nothing but a service, right? And the services would keep on talking to each other, and when they talk to each other, they need to exchange some data. That data is termed as messages, and this data typically will be in either XML format or JSON format. We may have other formats also, but then the 90 to 95% of the times you may have these as the predominantly used format for the data exchange. Until 6 7 years back, XML was leading, and now with REST going going very heavy on the market, with mobile integrations coming in, with the mindset that enterprises have started opening their data more freely to their business partners, to their customers. JSON has started gaining a lot of market. Still, I mean, XML is existing in the industry and it would keep on existing, but then a lot of fresh developments where we develop some public APIs and all. JSON has predominantly started gaining the attention than XML, but then we will focus on both and we'll make sure that you understand both very well, right? So this is let me, before I go to the next thing, let me just quickly paraphrase whatever I have covered. So we are here to understand SOA, yeah, and in SOA specifically Oracle SOA, but I don't speak about Oracle SOA from day one because you need to first understand what exactly is SOA. So SOA is an architecture, right? And what does it stand for? It stands for service oriented architecture. So in its name itself, it says that its orientation is service. So we need to definitely understand service, but then what kind of architecture is? It is loosely coupled architecture. Loosely coupled means agile, a flexible architecture, which says that two parties which are talking to each other need not to be dependent on at the same time. Such kind of architecture it is. It is going to help in integration, right? It is going to help in integration within an enterprise in a more loosely coupled manner. But then what exactly is integration? Integration is the process of collaboration where n number of applications which are part of an enterprise starts talking to each other to drive more value for the business, right? So the traditional way or I would rather say monolithic way to do this integration was, it was a point to point integration. Like there were two systems which eventually needed to talk to each other. The developers used to write some custom codes at each application end to convert the data from one system in a format which is understood by other systems, which had a lot of overhead on each application's end. There was tight coupling because of the fact if one application goes down, it used to impact the other member applications. And whenever we have to grow our business, and in the process of doing so, whenever we add some applications, we we have a high time to market because there is a lot of custom coding which is required, right? Then then understanding this business problem statement, right, a new invention came in. I'll talk about encapsulation. Let me go in a flow, and when I come to that, I'll talk about encapsulation, Sanjeev. Yeah. So then there came a era where we started working on loosely coupled integration. We realized that there is a need of loosely coupled integration, and there was an architecture which facilitates loosely coupled integration. So that is where we realized that we have to come up with a middle layer or another piece of software which facilitates the integration of the disparate applications which might be built in different technologies, which might be running under different platform to talk to each other. And that is where SOA came in limelight. So a lot of integration products were built leveraging this architecture so that different applications can talk to each other in an agile manner, right? And these integration products will have the capability to do the validations, enrichments, transformations, orchestrations, routing, mediations, etc. So there are n number of things you can do with this integration products. And some of the integration, I told this wedding planner and all, I'll not repeat, but some of the integration products which are very famous in the market right now are, so we have products from Oracle. Oracle has been the leader in the market. Oracle SOA Suite. From IBM, we have IBM's own suite. TIBCO. Right now, a lot of people might have heard a buzz about MuleSoft, Dell Boomi. Then we have products from Informatica. We have got Jitterbit. We have got SnapLogic, and so on. But then, if you want to get your basics right, you should start with the traditional tools. I right now work with a lot of fresh developers who have started their career with MuleSoft and Dell Boomi, but then they don't understand the basics. If you ask them what is SOA, they do not know, because these tools, the new tools which are coming in the market, are very very intuitive, and you hardly need to do the coding. It looks like you're using Facebook, right? So you have to just do the configurations and things start working for you. But then that the bad part is that you never understand the underlying architecture, you never understand the underlying concepts of integration. So it's good that you guys have chosen to work on Oracle SOA Suite, right? This is I think a good start on integration track, right? So then I started talking about SOA in detail. I said the two pillars which are going to drive your this architecture, or which are the backbone of this architecture, are services and messages. And I say service is nothing but the logical encapsulation of some self-contained business functionality. So now when I say encapsulation, encapsulation would mean like kind of bundling different things with one another, and at the same time hiding the underlying complexity. Okay, so now for example, if I give you an example, so here there is a business functionality which might do the, for example, there is a business functionality of doing the calculations. Okay, and this calculations typically, if I take a simple example, there might be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There may be a square root, cube root, and so on. N number of things are required, right? So now what happens is, I might be interacting with one service, right? And that might be doing the task for me. That is how I look at it. But then there might be a lot of underlying services which are working in collaboration with the actual service to get the task done. But those all details are abstracted for me. I'm not aware. Those all are encapsulated in a way that I don't know what are the underlying services. So you go to a bank ATM, right, and you swipe your card, and then you get n number of operations you can perform, right? N number of tasks you can perform. So you make a, so what do you feel is, For example, there is a screen which says you want to generate a mini statement or you want to do a cash withdrawal. You click on that, and then you start getting another n number of options. So we feel that we are interacting with one UI, or that one UI might be internally calling one service exposed by the underlying party, but then that is only the one service which is exposed to the consumer. But internally, there are a lot of other services which have to collaborate with each other to get the task done. Other example I can give is you use a remote to switch on your TV, right? So, what is the underlying complexity so that some transmission of waves are happening to TV, and then a lot of n number of things need to collaborate with one another to get the task done. But then from a user standpoint, that complexity is encapsulated. So user is not aware about the underlying complexity. User need not to know about that complexity, and that is the beauty of service oriented architecture. My source application, source party need not to know which technology has been used, which what is the underlying technology. So I might develop a service in Java, .NET, PHP, or whatever. So that should not impact the way it is consumed. So that is what the encapsulation means, right? And the message would mean the data which is exchanged among the services, right? Which can be either XML or JSON. Any questions from anyone so far?
Yeah, Sumit, excuse me. This is Kalyan. I have one quick question.
Mhm.
So you said that Oracle Server Suite supports various data for file format like XML and JSON, right?
Mhm.
So if the reason is a kind of a use case we have in our place, we also use XML JSON, but we also have Avro format. Like this. Something
Uh,
with the Server Suite.
what is that format? Actually, your voice was cracking when
Breaking.
you were speaking. Yeah,
Better.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not constantly breaking, but then yeah, it's breaking in between. Yeah, please
Uh,
try to.
yeah, sure. Avro, AVRO, Avro file format, because we do have some of the some of our systems are running on AWS. So some of their services are supporting these kind of file exchange Avro. So if we have to bring in those kind of file format using a Oracle Sova Suite, is that possible, or do we need to do something for a newer file format whenever it comes in?
See, I will be very honest with you. I have not heard about this file format. Maybe you can ping in the chat window, and I need to check. But then let me tell you that Oracle Source Suite gives you provision to. So typically, we don't recommend writing the Java code. But then, if there are some exceptional needs, we can write some Java code to convert that format into the format which Oracle so understands.
Okay.
So you always have a provision to write Java code, but I don't think there is out of the box support for the format which which you are mentioning. But then let me verify once.
Sure. I'll ping you separately.
Yep. Yeah.
Thanks.
So now, see, I would be very honest with you. Like Oracle Source Suite has been phenomenally well for your on-prem integrations. I'm not sure. Like there might be. I hope everyone of you understands this. But then let me. So there are three basically types of integration based on the fact where your applications are residing. So there are on-prem integrations, cloud integrations, and hybrid integrations, right? So Oracle SOA has been a leader in the market from on-prem integrations, right? So I think right from 2010 or even before than that, it has been a leader on on-prem integration. So on-prem integration would mean that you have your n number of applications behind your corporate firewall, and you need to exchange the data with one another, right? And then you have cloud integration. Now with cloud gaining a lot of market, most of the enterprises have started partially or fully started moving to the cloud, like AWS, Azure, uh, PCF, and so on. Then there is another type of integration where source and target applications are completely on cloud. But then the more common scenario which you will see right now in the industry is hybrid integration. Hybrid integration would mean that some of the applications are on cloud, where the rest of those are on-prem, and you need to integrate these, right? So SOA works well for on-prem integrations, right? It is not for cloud integrations, right? So, and then definitely Oracle is working hard to make it more compatible for hybrid integrations, right? So on-prem would mean that you have your systems within the enterprise firewall. So these are not publicly available, right? So for example, uh, so you yourself maintain your CRM. It is hosted on the server, which is running your own data center, right? And then you have another application, maybe a custom portal, which is also hosted on a server that is again within your data centers, right? Or it is in the organization's data center. But then when you rely on some third parties services, like we have got Google, we have got AWS, Azure, so they have come up with their own huge heavy data centers where you can host your applications without having the need of maintaining your applications. So they do that job for you in a more economical way. That is where people are moving on to the cloud. But then I have rarely seen, there are very few case studies where enterprises have completely moved on to the cloud. So understanding, we have to understand like which applications, if moved to the cloud, will have the benefit for the enterprise. So that's how, like, a lot of people are using Salesforce, which is hosted on cloud, but then they may have their data warehouse still on-prem, right? So that is where the need of hybrid integration comes. Gradually, maybe we may have more need of cloud integrations, but then hybrid integration, I think would definitely be there for always. There are a lot of companies who come from BFSI sector, banking and finance, where they have a lot of security concerns or regulation issues, because of which they may not have that freedom to get the data moving out of their data centers and so on. So that's where on-prem and hybrid are there in the market, would be there, but then definitely cloud will also play a very vital role, specifically for a few industries where we have more deregularized, rules and regulations. Yeah. So any questions so far from anyone? So now coming back to this track, like when I say cloud, right, it doesn't mean cloud. So cloud part hasn't been covered by Oracle. Definitely they have covered it. They have something called as OIC, which is called as Oracle Integration Cloud, which internally leverages service-oriented architecture only. So some people who have worked on Oracle Suite should find it a cakewalk to work on Oracle Integration Cloud, right? They will find it really easy. But now then what people have started doing is they directly start working on OIC, which is okay in a way, but then they don't know the underlying things which are happening on that OIC. Because as I told you, these all cloud-based platforms, right? These all are very, very intuitive. The underlying architecture and all those details, people do not get exposure so freely until and unless someone is really interested to know about it. But then when you use this Oracle Source Suite, you are bound to know it, because a lot of things, a lot of code sometimes is required to be customized. You need to know what are the backend files which are getting generated. But then that is not the case with the cloud-based solutions. Yeah. Any questions so far from anyone?
Hi Sumit, Asirvad here. Just one question. Suppose for a SOA developer, how is it for are the concepts are same for the MuleSoft or Delphim? Because in our company, many of the people are from SOA is moving towards MuleSoft and Delphumi. So is it like the concepts are same and just there are some different terminologies and things like that? Also for the OIC, just if you
Yeah.
can elaborate
So what
a couple
I
of
would
minutes.
say is, see, I will tell you my journey. I started my career with Oracle Fusion Middleware. I started with Oracle Source Suite almost 10 years back. But then uh, I have been successfully able to learn all these products in a matter of 1 month or maybe 2 months, because the concept remains same everywhere as long as you're working in integration products. And if you're a champion on a specific product, switching the product should not be a problem for you. Only few jargons would change, right? So somewhere, for example, whenever you need to connect with some third party, right, you use something called as adapter. So for example, I want to talk with an Oracle database. So what does this product offers is Oracle Sewer Suite offers you a out of the box connector where you need to do certain configurations and you can establish the connectivity. So you need not to write some custom code in JDBC to establish the connectivity. You need not to maintain sessions. You need not to worry about the security aspect. So that job is already done for you. You have our out of the box connector and you can leverage it. So the same thing in MuleSoft, it is termed as connector, right? So the point I'm trying to make is there is a naming convention difference, right? But more or less the architecture, the basic concepts remain same. You work in any integration, eventually you are either doing transformation or routing or orchestration or enrichment, right? So for example, if you're working in Oracle Source Suite, you might do transformations using XSLT and XQuery. Okay, those people who do not understand it, don't bother. I'm going to cover all these things. These are the two predominantly used languages in Oracle Source Suite for transformation to convert from one data format to another. Whereas in MuleSoft, it is DataWeave, or we had earlier Mule Expression Language, right? Similarly, in Dell Boomi, they don't expose that what is the underlying language. You cannot see that code. They are very intuitive. So you just can do drag and drop. You do not know what is the underlying technology used to do those transformations. So you cannot do that. But then they have a support for writing some Groovy scripts or JavaScript in case you want to do something out of the box. Also, there is a provision that you can use XSLT over there also. Similarly, in MuleSoft also there is a provision you can use XSLT, right? But then these different product-based companies are coming with their own proprietary language to do the transformation, whereas Oracle, SOA, and all these were built in such a way that these transformation languages are not proprietary to Oracle or IBM, right? So these are vendor neutral. So learning, switching from one tool to another should not be a problem as long as you understand this Oracle Source Suite, right? Working on ICS or Dell Boomi should not be a big deal for you.
Hi Sumit.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I have one thing to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I am working on identity and access management domain actually. So SOA is one of the part actually we are using there to make workflows. Like if somebody requesting one entitlement, then that should go to the correct level of approvals and all. So like that's why I joined this course. So like, will we see these things actually in future? I'm not aware. That's why.
See, actually, I'll tell you about workflows. Yeah. So basically, within Oracle Source Suite, or there is something called as Oracle BPM. Okay. Typically, that is the place where we design the workflows, and it is also for service-oriented architecture. But then Oracle BPM is a separate training altogether. I'll touch base how like Oracle BPM internally uses business rules and human task components extensively. I will make use of that component, but then it will not be those approval systems where we have swim lanes and n number of different approvers will not be part of this training. But then
Uh,
if you talk about SOA transformations, DeepL, yes, extensively that would be part of this training.
Okay, so but at least we will go through like how to use those component in JDeveloper and all, because I never use JDeveloper till now.
Yeah, that
Like,
would be there for sure.
uh,
Okay. So, guys, any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, Sumit, sorry. Which product do you think that is a more market? I know Oracle was rolling this over for a while, but do you see any change in the market pattern moving away from certain tools and moving towards? I know each tool has got some share of market, but I mean, from your experience, which tool do you think it's going to be? If the reason why I'm asking is if we have to go and suggest some tool for the company to use this
Uh-huh.
integration tool, So we should provide them the informed. I mean, we got to guide them. This is where the market is going towards, right? So that's why, in that point of view, I'm asking this question. From your experience, where do you see these tools, or which tool is taking over the
Okay.
market?
Yeah. So that this is a very tricky question to answer. So I would say that each tool has its own pros and cons, and each tool, as you rightly mentioned, has its own share of market. And so there are some tools which are running very good in Europe, but they are not doing good in US market, right? So now see, Oracle has been a giant in this integration space for a while now. But then what has happened is, with this lot of buzz about API. Like you all might have heard, if you have not heard, please do the research. You will hear a lot about APIs, right? Which
Yeah.
is not a new concept. Something which was introduced by Oracle almost 15 years back has been rebundled and remarketed with some more sophisticated terms by MuleSoft, and because of their marketing strategy, they have gained a lot of good market, right? And also, a place where Oracle little bit is lacking is their cloud integration. Okay,
Sure.
so I'll be very honest with this group. The reason even why I myself switched to Delboomi and MuleSoft was Oracle's was fantastic. I'll tell you that. So there is no problem. But then when I go to OIC, and I've been personally asked lot many times to take sessions for OIC by different institutes. Like a lot of people are fascinated the way I teach, but then I have a philosophy: until I am convinced with some product, I myself don't teach it because I cannot do justification with the topic. So I would say OIC is a piece where Oracle has, uh, you know, lost the race for now. But then Oracle itself is, earlier actually it was not OIC earlier. Earlier it was ICS only. Then they brought some other new capabilities and then they rebundled into OIC. So a more maturity is required in this domain of cloud.
Sure.
So when you say integration, right? So I cannot say that this is the product to go. I have to understand what is the need of integration. So let's say the need of integration is on-prem. I would say Oracle SOA Suite is the leader. Okay,
Okay.
but then if you say it is a cloud integration, I may not say OIC as a leader. Then I will say go for MuleSoft or Delboomi. But
Okay.
then I do a lot of pre-sales work for my company. So the
Mhm.
most important factor, which is always there while giving any recommendation, is the dollar value, right? You may have thousands of features, but then if you do not have the budget, you cannot do recommendation. And even if you do that, it's not going to help. So from all standpoint, I personally see that Delboomi has got a good market. I mean, Delboomi has a good future, and it is going to have a very good market in future for cloud integrations. For on-prem, Oracle SOA Suite, products like Oracle SOA Suite, or some people use BizTalk, right? IBM Service Bus, these are going to rule. And even for hybrid, then there will be 50-50. Some people might use their cloud integration product itself for hybrid, and then those people who have already invested on their on-prem platform might still keep on working for hybrid. But then for on-prem, my recommendation will be SOA. For cloud, my recommendation will be MuleSoft if it is a very big enterprise where we have 1,000+ integrations, or else it is Delboomi. For hybrid, if the person, it depends on what is the ratio of on-prem to cloud applications.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation. So do you think MuleSoft is very open to connect to Oracle ERP or SAP very easily? Because if you take Oracle ERP, since Oracle SOA is it's the same neighborhood, both Oracle SOA and ERP, so they can talk to each other pretty good. So if you take MuleSoft, well, MuleSoft can have a better integrations with say Oracle ERP or SAP or
No,
something like that.
no. So my experience with MuleSoft hasn't been good. I'll be very honest with you. I don't see that return on investment on MuleSoft, but then I don't know how they are doing wonders in the market right now. So
Okay.
With Oracle, it really sucks. They do not have the ability right now to even call a Oracle stored procedure with a complex data type. We
Oh,
have to
okay.
write a lot of custom we have to write a lot of custom Java code, but then why would I spend crores of money? I mean, I'm talking about INR. Why will I
Mhm.
spend crores of money, crores of rupees to write some Java custom code, right? So
True.
I have had a very bad experience. So then see, that's where you brought a very interesting point. So if my customer's landscape is Oracle, right, it is always
Mhm.
driven by your core products, like whether you are
True.
using SAP ERP, you are using Oracle E-Business Suite or Oracle Fusion. Those are the designing factors, because integration cannot live in a silo. You cannot decide the integration platform without studying the tools or the applications which are required to be integrated. So if it is Oracle ERP and all, still I will recommend Oracle based product, and that is why still Oracle has a very significant share even in the integration space, because a lot of people are heavily invested on Oracle. I have seen customers who move towards MuleSoft, then they had tasted that how it looks, and some things which are very easy to do in Oracle SOA, I have to write, you will thousands and thousands of lines of code in MuleSoft, and then they are switching back to Oracle. That
Okay.
has really happened. So it's all about buzz. See, this concept of API, now I have a lot of fresh developers in my team. They think that they have come up with some out of the box concept, but API is not a new concept. API
True.
has been there in the market for 20 years, but then who can understand it, right? Like people who are there in the industry for 20, 25 years or 10 years can understand it. But those people who have 2, 3 years of experience, who do not know PLSQL, who do not know Oracle SOA and these traditional tools, they feel API is a new
Concept.
invention altogether, right?
Okay.
Which is not the case. So they feel API means REST service, REST API, but that is a completely wrong
Mm.
understanding. For me,
True.
API is a mechanism to expose your logic without exposing the underlying complexity, right? So function is an API for me, a procedure is an API for me, a subroutine is an API for me, web service is an API for me. So
Okay.
API is the father, whereas these all are sub branches. So web service is just one branch of API which allows you to exchange the data on a internet. That is where web service got a lot of buzz from, right? Because it allowed you to exchange the data on an
Internet.
internet, right? And then within web service, earlier we had SOAP based web service, even REST based web service has been there for a while. It is not a new concept. Oracle SOA Suite has been supporting REST for a long time, but then where Oracle lagged initially, which has been well taken care in their latest version, is support for JSON,
Okay.
right? And that is where the race, that is where they gain the race. The people like MuleSoft, right? So, but if you go to MuleSoft and you start working on XML, it sucks. It does not. It You will not understand how it is behaving. And believe me, they're like I work with them directly. So we are partners with MuleSoft. So they give some bullshit reasons for all their explanation, which you will not buy in, because when you're spending, millions of dollars to get their license, and then you don't see that happening, it's not going to help. So I don't recommend MuleSoft until and unless you have a whole cloud integration landscape. And other thing is, if you have 1,000 plus integrations, so you will not see that return on investment.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry, guys. I asked a long question.
But
Sorry
then,
about that.
I mean, see, I know it is like like a out of track question, but then, guys, these kind of things are good to know, right? Especially for the people who have 10 plus years of experience, these kind of discussions are very, very mandatory to be part of, because I personally feel like when you get into the leadership role, you must know these kind of stuff.
Yeah. Thank.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys, if I went off track. I am very talkative, so please excuse me for that. Let's come back, guys, to this SOA concept, right? We were talking about the services and messages. Service is the logical encapsulation of some self-contained business functionality. But then, what exactly it is? I would say, web service is the implementation of SOA, which means, see, SOA is a concept, right? It has to be realized with something. Something has to materialize it. So then web service materializes it. So whenever you're working in SOA, right, eventually those services, whatever I've been talking about, right, that logical encapsulation of some self-contained business functionality, those are nothing but web services. Yeah, those are nothing but web services. So now what happens is, whenever you are working in a service oriented architecture, so service oriented architecture typically is like a client server architecture. So all of us directly or indirectly are somehow related to the client server architecture in our day-to-day life. And as soon as we start using our browser for browsing different things on internet, we are leveraging this architecture. So now, when you browse on internet, you use a browser, maybe a Google Chrome, Mozilla, Opera, whatsoever, and you send a request to the resource which is residing on a server. So your client sends a request. You are not the client actually. Your browser is the client. From IT standpoint, browser sends a request, server intercepts that request, processes that request, and returns a response. Right. On a very similar note, your service-oriented architecture will have three players: service consumer, service provider, and the third and something is registry or UDDI, or I would say some central repository. Okay. So now, so we have been theoretically talking about service-oriented architecture, but then if I have to make it more clear, I would say there are three different, players or the roles. So there will be a service consumer, there will be a service provider, and there will be central repository, which is also called as registry or UDDI. So now, what happens when we implement service-oriented architecture? So there will be a service consumer, right over here. Then there will be a service provider, right? So as an Oracle SOA guy, right? So as an integration guy, when I'm working on Oracle SOA suite, this is where you will see most of the times yourself. Yeah. So most of the times we are going to be the service providers. We are going to develop the services. In few cases, definitely we will be the service consumers also. But then let's first start understanding this role, right? Because we are leveraging service oriented architecture, and the idea is to do the integration, right? So what we will do is we will develop some logic, and that logic will be exposed with the help of services, because service oriented architecture revolves around services, right? So as a service provider, I'm going to develop some services. And what do you mean by that service? That service will be nothing but a web service, right? A web service. So I would say this web service is nothing but web plus service. A service which is available on the web is a web service, or I would say a web service is a software function or functionality. Uh, Web service is a software function provided at network address over the web, right? So this is nothing but like a function only, but then it is hosted over the web. You can access it over the web, and you need not to know the underlying complexity. So that is always there with the function. So if most of you might have had exposure to C language back in your school or college days. So where we write a lot of C functions, C language functions to introduce the concept of modularity, right? So same way your web service works. The only difference is it is hosted over the web, and it will allow two or different applications to exchange the data over the internet, right? And you need not to know the underlying complexity in which the business logic is written, right? So I might write a web service using Java, I might write a web service using .NET, but then the consumer party need not to know that underlying technology, right? So the way they are going to consume it is going to remain same, whether it is Java based or REST or .NET based, or maybe for that matter it might be like Oracle SOA based also, but then the way it is consumed remains same, right? So as an Oracle SOA guy, most of the times you will find yourself over here, you are developing some services, right? So now let me ask you one question. If let's say you are going to develop some web service site, so and there has to be some consumers to that, right? So a typical scenario will be, let's say there is a portal, right? There is an e-commerce portal from where your customers can purchase some products, right? So there is an e-commerce portal which allows your customers to purchase products, and whenever they raise an order, eventually that data has to land into ERP. Okay, maybe you are using some Oracle based ERP, and now it does not only go to the ERP, but then there are some n number of systems which are required to be informed about this order to make sure that the order fulfillment happens. And for that, we are making use of some integration product, and that integration product might be, let's say, Oracle SOA Suite, right? And within Oracle SOA Suite, we have 11G and 12C. I'm not sure if anybody would want to work on 11G, but then the latest version we have in the market is 12C, where C stands for cloud support. At this came, I think, in 2014, or even it was there in 2013 and 14, and we have a lot of subversions within that. We'll talk about that, right? So now what I do is, as an Oracle SOA guy, I will develop a web service. So I am the service provider. I will develop some web service. Now this web service will be exposed to the e-commerce portal team that they need to consume my service, right? So I am service provider. So they will be the service consumers. So now when I publish my details, I say I am developing a web service, right? So now the question is, if let's say I developed one service, or a web service rather, and you are consumer of it, right? And I say, let's say my web service name is order fulfillment service, something like this. Or just to keep it simple for now, I would say my service name is edition service. Yeah, let's say I am developing a service which will allow you to do the edition, right? And now you tell me if you want to make use of my service, right? So the basic idea of web service is, first of all, it hides the underlying complexity. Second thing is, it is accessible over the web. Third thing is, it highly encourages the concept of reusability. So since and why, so reusability concept was there with functions also. It was there with it was there with methods also. But then why it has gained more popularity is because it is accessible over the web, right? And you need not to basically get some jars and all those things. It is accessible over the web, and as long as you are there over the internet or part of the same network, you can start accessing the resources. So since the accessibility is easier, so reusability is more. But now coming back to the question which I was asking, so let's say I am a service provider, I developed one service, and you want to make use of my service, okay? Or else, in other words, I can say web service is a function, yeah, and I developed a function. Maybe I'm a PLSQL developer, I developed a function, or I'm a C developer, I developed a function, and you people are part of my team, and I want you guys to make use of my function instead of writing your own one, because I feel that since I've already written it, let's reuse it. So is the name of the function sufficient for you people to leverage my function, or do you need something else?
We need to know more about our functions, like data which you pass and all, like return.
Yeah, I think you are getting the right answer. You're absolutely right. So yeah, please go ahead. So I think somebody said parameters, which is absolutely correct. So if in a single word, I would say I need to know the signature of the function. Yeah, until and unless I know the signature of the function, I cannot make use of any function. Just knowing the name of the function is not sufficient, right? So I need to definitely know the name of the function, but then that is only one of the many things. There is a need to know the number of parameters, order of parameters, data type of parameters, return type of the function. Yeah, so these are the few things we need to know. Of course, location is definitely required. I'm assuming that we know the location, but then if you do not know location, which class it is part of, all those things, right? Which package is it part of, you cannot know. So you need to know all these n number of details before you start making use of any function. And I am anyhow telling web service is a function, right? Web service, you visualize web service as a function which is accessible over the web, right? Now you tell me just knowing the name of the web service should not be sufficient, right? So what else you need to know? You also need to know the signature of the web service. So until you know the signature of the web service, you cannot make use of any function. So what happens is, coming back to the point, I was explaining the architecture, service consumer and service provider. Just hold on, where it went. Yeah. So when the service provider is developing a service, the service provider needs to publish the signature of the web service. So people can call it a signature of the web service. Some people call it as specifications of the web service. One or the same thing. So service provider definitely needs to publish the specifications of the service, so that service consumer goes through that specification and starts leveraging your service, right? So there is a service provider, there is a service consumer. Service consumer cannot do anything with your services until those specifications are known, right? So what happens is, there are two scenarios, right? So for example, service consumer and service provider know each other already, right? Coming back to the same example of wedding, right? So let's say I'm looking for an alliance for my brother. My younger brother needs to get married, so I've started looking for an alliance. Then I have a friend whose sister is also looking for an alliance, and we know each other well, right? And then we get into a kind of a agreement that yes, everything is in place, and now we have a relation established, right? So two parties start communicating with each other, right? So that happens when you know who is the service consumer and who is the service provider, right? So typically, when we work in a service based company, right, when you start integrating a portal with an ERP or a CRM with an ERP and so on, so you know who is service consumer, who is service provider, uh, and these people start talking to each other directly, right? But then there are scenarios where I'm looking for an alliance, but I don't know anyone. I go and I publish the profile of my brother onto a matrimonial portal, right? So that matrimonial portal, how does it help is, as a uh, it acts as a repository, it acts as a third party service, where a lot of service consumers, like a lot of other people who are looking for an alliance would come and would start looking for the matches or the perfect alliance for them, right? And once they find someone who is relevant to their criteria, then these two parties start talking to each other. So they may get the contact details of that person from that matrimonial portal, and they somehow start talking to each other. So the point I'm trying to make is, you are eventually, all the communication has to happen between service consumer and service provider, but then there might be scenarios where we might need some third party, which is called as UDDI, which stands for Universal Description, Discovery and Integration. So this third party is more or less like a central repository, very helpful in case service consumer and service provider do not know each other. Then in that case, what would happen is, service provider will develop a service and it will publish the specifications of the service in UDDI. Please understand this carefully. Service is not deployed in UDDI. UDDI is not a server where we can deploy the service. It is just a repository. It is kind of a marketplace to hold the specifications of the service, to know the details, to publish the details of your service, right? And then there might be n number of service consumers who come and basically makes use of this UDDI to search the services as per their needs. Once service consumers identifies the correct service, then two parties start talking to each other directly. Then there is no role of this UDDI, right? But then it helps in doing the collaboration in all such scenarios where you have n number of service consumers and the service provider do not know who is the potential consumer for them, right? So then in that case, this UDDI will play a significant role. So these all concepts has been there, right? So now MuleSoft came up with their concept, which is called as exchange. It is not that, so Oracle had something, 10 10 plus years back, now MuleSoft has come up with something on a very similar lines, but then they have made it look, they have modernized it. That is the only difference. But this concept of UDDI, like since the time I started my career, it has been there. This is not a new concept. Yeah. Now, any questions in this regard?
Sumit, you want to explain the same way, like K2 Academy is nothing but like you are service provider and it is connecting us with you. We are service consumer like that.
Absolutely. But then I don't like taking the example of K21 Academy, but you're right. But you are right.
Okay.
K21 Academy is the collaborator. It is like an orchestrator, which is bringing all of us onto the same platform. Yeah.
And
So sorry.
oh, sorry, no, you can go ahead. I will ask later.
Thanks. Thank you. So the last point which you mentioned got my attention. So in that case, not all the services needs to be registered under UDDI. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's right. So at many of the places, so see, that is where like Oracle gave that flexibility, right? Whether you publish it or not, it's okay. You have to configure it separately. You have to, like, it's like a plugin. You have to add on separately. But then what MuleSoft did is it bundled it into a package and it told that it is a standard. You publish it. People, so why it said so is that until you're publishing it in a central repository, how you make it discoverable. So I am a service provider. I developed a service, right? And I gave you to consume it. Now let's say I have my enterprise grows. I have n number of subdivisions. Different LOBs are running. Now there is a LOB which may already be having a service to interact with the database, but then how do I know it until I publish into some central repository? So so that was a flaw in a way, and that has been picked up, and they said that this is a standard. You have to do it, and that is where is the differentiation. But then these all features like API management all were there in Oracle.
Yeah, true.
They-
So okay. But the UDII, so if I develop a service in SOA suite, will the UDII is the automated process, or do I have
no,
to go to a different
no.
component? I mean, different place to go and register this?
Yeah, so UDDI is a generic concept. Then Oracle has something called a specific Oracle Service Registry. So
Okay.
it's kind of a plugin. You have to add it on the top of that, and there you can publish it.
Okay. Thank you.
But then you have to understand that you don't. So a lot of people think that their services are available on UDDI or the OSR. It's only the specifications which are available over there, right? Your actual service might be still running on some application server like WebLogic or WebSphere for that matter. But then, yeah, only the specifications are published.
Okay.
Any questions so
Hey,
far
hi,
from anyone?
hey, hi, Sumit. Sanjit here. Sumit, actually, I'm quite new to this SOA and all. Can you let me explain what is ERP actually? Means I
I
actually
want
can't.
someone from the group to explain that. I have heard a lot of people who come from ERP background. I would take a pause over here, and it would be great if someone from the group can talk about it. Even maybe they can. So there are people with 10 plus years of experience in ERP background, so they may add more value. Would someone like to take a lead and speak about ERP? If I have to explain to layman in maybe 5 minutes.
Sure. I can. If no one is
Yeah,
there, I can take it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Please do
Kalyan,
that.
sure.
Yeah. So basically, ERP is nothing but, just to give you a acronym, it's enterprise resource planning. As you see, there are three keywords: enterprise, resource, and planning. So enterprise, it's a company wide. Resource, anything in the company is a resource. For example, your accounting is a resource. In fact, your manufacturing is a resource. So how do you plan running this business? That's the third factor, ERP, right? So ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. The software which facilitates all these resources is the core concept of ERP. So if you take Oracle ERP, because I have more experience with Oracle ERP, it is a product. It's a bundle of product which consists of these modules: financial modules, order management, you name it, anything. Well, HR is different, but HR is also part of a resource if you look at it technically. But product wise, they separate it out. But so any back office work, you consider the company as a resource that is considered to be the enterprise product of ERP. So there are various vendors. SAP is one of them. Oracle is one of them. Even sometimes nowadays, sales also is considered to be a resource because without a sales, there is nothing in the company. So think of that as nothing but a stack of software modules which forms the ERP. I don't know whether I answered your question clearly, but that's the conceptually you can think of.
Okay. ERP means actually you want to tell, like, for example, in any enterprise we have lots of resources, and how we manage those resources and how we deal with that is something called ERP. If my understanding is correct, if I'm not sure.
Correct. Yeah, administrating through the software. Administrating and planning and maintaining those resources through the software is what the ERP suite software.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So here we are integrating our source with ERP in the Sumit, can you go above a little
Okay.
where the diagram was there? We are, yeah, ERP, yeah. Like e-commerce is trying to integrate with ERP. Like what exactly it signifies?
Sure.
Uh,
A typical example, right? So ERP is, let's say, e-commerce. Um, let's take the one step backwards. Let's say order management, right? Whenever somebody places an order, there are a lot of things going on behind the scene. So it touches a various part of your business. If an order is placed, there are so many things going on in your company. Like your inventory has to be updated, your fulfillment has to be happen, even your financials. Oh, I'm going to sell this. So with that selling, this is my profit. So there are a lot of things. Those smaller components are called, as I said, it's all resources. So when you integrate with third party or this e-commerce, whatever, anything you sell out, you get the data. That is the integration you was explaining. So you get the data and you go and update your ERP. At the same way, once your order is received, you have to send the message confirmation saying that yes, your order will be shipped on so and so date, right? That is again another data you are sending it from your company inventory to the consumer. It's kind of, you can imagine that Amazon, right? So you place an order in Amazon, Amazon goes and updates their inventory saying that, hey, here is your product, it's going to deliver on this. Behind the scene, it touches so many areas. That so many areas behind the scene is what is explaining as an integration. And also you had at a point called encapsulations. All those details are not there. As far as our consumer is concerned, we have Amazon is a UI page. You hit the button, it goes and does everything. All those things are happen behind the scene using these one of these technologies.
Kalyan, thank you so much. You are really nice. I understood. Thank you so much, Kalyan. Thank you, Sumit.
Thanks.
Kalyan, I think if you will speak for some more time, you will take up my job.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he's really nice. Actually, I really understood how the things were. I can picture it in my mind. Thank you so much, Kalyan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shows my age, by the way.
I have a question on the UDDI. Can you make an example? I never used it before, so I don't know how it look like. How to search for the information in
So
UDDI.
let me do one thing. If it is possible, right? I mean, if there is no licensing constraint of that sort, when I'm doing my hands-on sessions, let me introduce this topic this time. Let me try to show how this would work. Yeah.
Okay.
So guys, coming back to the point I was making, like as you guys rightly mentioned that you need to know the signature of the function while talking to any function. Similarly, on a very similar note, when you're talking to a web service, you need to know the signature of the web service, and that signature of the web service is published into UDDI in case you are making use of it, or else it might be published to the service consumer directly, right? So for web services, what happens is like there are some protocols, right? So the more predominantly used protocols are REST-based web services. So REST is actually not a protocol. REST is an architecture, yeah, and the underlying protocol is HTTP, and there are SOAP-based web services, which is again another protocol. So the point I'm trying to make is, as a service provider, you develop web services. That point is very clear. So as an Oracle SOA guy, you will be developing n number of services. Now these services adhere to some protocol. Protocol is nothing but some set of rules and regulations. So when some data exchange has to happen over the web, it has to, you know, adhere to some standards, right? So there are different standards. So there are another protocols which are used. We'll talk about it, but right for now, the two protocols where I want our focus should be the REST-based ones and the SOAP-based ones, and we can have a very big discussion, right? Why, how REST is better than SOAP and how SOAP is better than REST. But then I would say there are some specific use cases where REST definitely has an advantage over SOAP, but then uh, there are some cases where SOAP still stands, far more mature than REST. So REST is an architecture, SOAP is a protocol, right? So SOAP is a protocol, and for REST, the underlying protocol which is used is HTTP. So a lot of people ask in the interview, or like I typically ask, what is the difference between REST and HTTP? And I have rarely seen anybody answering it right. So I would say REST is the specialized way of using HTTP. Okay, so REST is like certain rules and regulations which are imposed on the way we use HTTP protocol. Okay, it's kind of a subset of HTTP. Uh, SOAP definitely internally can make use of HTTP, but then SOAP is not restricted to HTTP. SOAP can use FTP, SOAP can use SMTP, and so on. Maybe down the line the REST is being made more mature and it should start also supporting other protocols, but for now I have seen REST using HTTP only, but with SOAP we can use some other protocols. I will talk in an elaborated manner on the differences between REST and SOAP, but for now idea is to make you understand about web service, types of web service, and then when I was telling you about specifications, so what happens is, as a service provider, when I develop some services, there has to be some service consumer who needs to make use of it. Let's say there is a service consumer, so that service consumer is going to make use of it with the help of some specifications which are published with the help of something called as WSDL. So you will come across this jargon very frequently, but then people are confused what is the significance of it. So I would say this WSDL is nothing but it represents the signature of the web service. Yeah. So I would say WSDL stands for Web Service Description Language. It is a XML based file which is used to describe the specifications of the web service. So when I say specifications, there are a lot of things. It specifies location of the service, right? So until and unless you know the location of the service, you cannot make use of it. It specifies the port information. It specifies the operations exposed by the service. It specifies the what we say, protocols associated with the service. It specifies the request and the response formats. Okay, it specifies the exchange pattern. I would say message or the data exchange pattern. Okay, so these all details you get to know from WSDL file. Okay, so when you're working in Oracle SOA Suite, so you will come across two files which will help you to describe about a web service: WSDL file and a WADL file. Okay, WADL will stand for Web Application Description Language. Okay, so typically when you're working with the REST services in Oracle SOA, you will see the description is there with the help of WADL file, and when you're working with the SOAP services, the description is there in the WSDL file. But then a lot of people conclude that if it is a WSDL, it will be always a SOAP-based web service. But then I don't adhere to that understanding. So WSDL is a mechanism to expose the details of a service, right? So that underlying service might be SOAP-based, might be REST-based. That is a different ball game altogether. But now in the industry, what is happening is, I mean, as far as my experience goes, people are using WSDL only for SOAP, whereas for REST, if you are working in Oracle Source Suite, it is WADL. But then for REST, there is no specific standard. I mean, REST is flexible in that regard. For SOAP, it is always WSDL. Okay, so you have to publish the specifications on the or the contract in the form of visual file, but in REST, so you are working on SOAP on IBM suite, Oracle suite, TIBCO, MuleSoft, it is always visual. Whereas when you are working on REST, there are different ways of exposing the specifications. One is WADL, which we'll see. Then there is RAML. Okay, this RAML stands for RESTful API modeling language. Okay, there is OS, which stands for Open API Specifications, and so on. So there are different ways you can represent your REST services. Now, whenever somebody somebody wants to consume your services, you have to make sure you publish the specifications. So for now, we'll start with the WSDL. So you have to expose a WSDL file to the service consumer, so that that end party gets to know all these details, and a seamless exchange of data or a communication bridge is established between a service consumer and a service provider, right? So now you have to understand that there are a lot of details which are embedded within the WSDL, and one of the things I mentioned is data exchange patterns, right? So when you're working in the integration domain, so there are some enterprise integration patterns. So we have close to 65 patterns which are followed across, but then those all patterns are grouped into either synchronous, asynchronous, or one way. So within synchronous, I may have n number of things. Within asynchronous, again, I may have n number of things, and so is the case with one way. But then when you are exchanging the data, these are the three broader exchange patterns which will be which you will be coming across, right? So I'm sure many of you might be already knowing it, but then it is very, very important for all of us to understand how these are different from each other, and each of these exchange patterns has its own relevance, right? So there are different use cases where synchronous might fit in, but then there are use cases where asynchronous has a role to play, and so on. Your Oracle Source Suite supports all, right? So now what happens is WSDL is a specification of the web service, as I mentioned some time back. So now when you expose a web service can expose n number of operations. For example, I say calculator is a web service. There is a web service calculator which can expose n number of operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Each operation can have its request and response parameters. Okay, each operation can have its own request and response parameters. For example, addition may take two integers as an input, right? I may have another operation called as square root, right, which takes only one integer or maybe a float as an input. So a web service can expose n number of operations. It may expose one or more than one operations. That is one thing, and each operation has its own request and response format, right? Or I would rather say first, each operation has its own exchange pattern. So there might be an operation where I will send the request and I will definitely get a response. There might be an operation which only takes the request but never returns a response. There might be another category of operation which takes the request, processes it, takes its own time. It might get into some workflow where some approval from a particular authority is required, and the response is returned after, let's say, some half an hour or some minutes or some hours or some days, then that is another category, and that is where the synchronous, asynchronous, and one way has a role to play, right? So what you have to understand is a web service is definitely a collection of operations. Each operation would either fit into synchronous, asynchronous, or one way, right? So I would say an operation is said to be synchronous if there is an immediate response for the corresponding request, and the request response traverses on the same channel or connection. Yeah. So an operation is said to be synchronous if there is an immediate response for the corresponding request and the request response traverses on the same channel, right? So it's an example can be that I ask you a question right now and you respond me back immediately, or I give you a call, right, and you pick up my call and we start exchanging the data. So we establish a connectivity. I might have called you, so I might be a service consumer. I need some information from you. You might be service provider. I established a communication by giving you a call, right? And we start exchanging the information. So maybe I ask you about your health, you respond me immediately. I ask you some other information and you respond me immediately. Other example maybe that I hit you and you hit me back immediately. So there is a request and there is a immediate response, right? So in case of synchronous communications, response is mandatory. That means your service consumer keeps on waiting for the response. So as a service provider, you have to ensure that the response is returned. Otherwise, your requester will keep on waiting, and after a certain period of time, that request gets timed out. I mean, so I mean, you can make it to wait indefinitely, but then that doesn't make sense. So it will have some saturation point configured for it, that it's, let's say, going to wait for 5 minutes, and if it doesn't wait for that 5 minutes, you may return a response, but then that person would consider, I mean, it's something like I give you a call, you pick up the call, but you don't respond, right? So I keep on saying hello, hello, and keep on waiting, but then after a certain point of time, I may disconnect that call. So same thing happens in case of synchronous. Typically, response has to be there, right? The source party or the initiator of the connectivity, or the party which initiates the connectivity, keeps on waiting for the response in case of synchronous communication, right? Whereas an operation is said to be asynchronous if there is a delayed response, right? So there is a response, right, but then there is a delayed response, which is also called as a callback. Why it is called as a callback, I will tell you. Here what happens is request and response traverses on different channels. Yeah. So an example can be that I complete 5 sessions and I see that there is a time where I should give you an assignment. So I drop you an email. I drop you an email that you please just complete this assignment. You take your own time, and then I'm not waiting for your response. I started a communication towards you. You received it, and my job is done. So the moment I say email sent successfully, my job is done. I know there would be a response, but there will be a delay. So that callback, the reason why it is called as a callback is it has to be instantiated from the service provider. So it's something like I give you a call, but then you don't pick up my call, maybe you are in a meeting. Then you do me a callback, right? So what happened is there are 2 different connectivities which were established. One connectivity was there from my side towards you, but you didn't respond. You received my request, but then you did not respond, right? So the moment I know that there is a ringtone, I mean the phone is ringing, it means you have received the communication from my side. My job is done. Then you do me a call back based on your availability. So that callback may happen after a minute, after an hour, after a month, or an year, right? But then, or in some cases, it may not happen at all. But then then that is another category one way. So asynchronous communication, I would say, is a combination of two one-way calls. Yeah, it is a combination of two one-way calls. One call is from requester to the provider, but how it is different from synchronous is requester does not wait for the response. Requester, the moment the request is submitted, it's done. So requester do not have any mechanism in place even to receive that response. So the response has to traverse via different channel, right? And that is done by the service provider, right? And then last category we have is one way. So an operation is said to be one way if there is no response. Yeah, which is also called as fire and forget. So whenever we have any sort of communication where we just send a request and there would be no response for that, then that is called as uh, one-way operation. So whenever you're working on a WSDL, right, you may have n number of operations. It is not mandatory that all the operations which are exposed within that web service will be in one category. Like all of them may not be synchronous, few of them might be synchronous, asynchronous, or one way. So we can very well have a web service which has a culmination of all these three different types, right? Any questions so far?
Uh, Hi, Sumit, Asirvad here. I have just one question, but this is regarding the difference between REST and SOAP that you have mentioned. Like you have mentioned that REST is a specialized way of using HTTP, and
Mm-hmm.
suppose we have a requirement that we need to write some file to some FTP, or we need to send some notification email, and suppose there is one ERP system and which is exposed a RESTful web service, and then we have to write some specific files to FTP, uh, or to some different enterprise content system like OneBase or Web Center. So how we can use SOA to call that RESTful web service and then write the file to FTP system and then
See,
this approach.
there are two things. One, the moment you are saying the end system is exposing REST service, okay, so then there is no FTP protocol. So they are exposing a REST service which is an HTTP protocol, but then HTTP can be also used to exchange files, right? So it is not necessary that you exchange files only over the FTP protocol, right? You can exchange the files over HTTP protocol also, right? So that is what we do over the internet. So now within HTTP protocol also there are provisions where we can send the attachments, and that is how the files would be exchanged in that case. So now a lot of services, like I was doing the integration with Unifier, where this is which is used predominantly in infra industry for project management and all, Primavera and Unifier. So there we have to send a lot of attachments, but then so we were sending a lot of base 64 encoded data, but then that goes within that HTTP protocol only. Okay, so you have to understand that if we have to exchange files, it is not only the FTP protocol which is used to exchange files, even you can use HTTP protocol also to exchange the files.
So we need to use the same file adapter, but we have to use the protocol as HTTP. Is that correct?
So see, file adapter is based on your file protocol only. So see, you have first question you told is that ERP is exposing a REST service, right? And so do you mean that using that REST service only they want to consume, they want us to send the file?
Yes, correct. And then we
Right, so
have to
then
write
there
it
is
to the FTP location.
no. So when you see, so if you have to write it as FTP location, then you are making use of FTP protocols. So there is no REST over there. Has anybody got the question? I mean, maybe I'm not understanding the question right. So see, if there is a REST service which is exposing some, which is accepting or accepting some data, I'm sorry, it is expecting some data and a file, then there are provisions. But then that does not mean that file is going through FTP protocol. We can exchange files over HTTP also. That is one thing.
Yes.
Second thing is,
Yes.
you are asking me to put that. See, when I'm doing it over HTTP, then I will hand it over to that API which is exposed by ERP. Then that is the headache of that ERP who is exposing me that API, that how do they absorb that service and write it to some file location or some FTP, some basically in some directory, because that functionality they may already have. That is how they expose the API. Now that is one thing. That is one requirement. Second requirement is, let's say I have to pull a file from one place, okay, and I have to push it somewhere. So then in that case, there is no HTTP protocol, there is FTP protocol.
Okay.
I know you are not happy with the answer, but then believe me, I didn't get the question right if I'm not answering it right.
That is fine. Actually, maybe I mean like actually my question is like, suppose there is a system which is using a RESTful web service. So I mean they should send the file as HTTP only over the internet, right? And then
Correct.
we can get the file, and then maybe we can use another adapter to write that to the
Correct.
FTP.
Yeah, that can be done. Yeah, that
Yeah.
you are right. So see, this integration platforms will help you to do the protocol translation. So there might be a source application which supports HTTP. There might be a target application which supports SOAP or FTP or some other protocol. So that protocol translation can be very well done with this integration platforms.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So guys, any other questions from anyone? So basically, this session was more about to give you an overall idea about what is SOA, where does Oracle SOA fall into the complete hierarchy of products, what is a web service, then what is a WSDL, right? So we have just talked about the WSDL on a very very high level, but then I'll talk it about it in a very very detailed manner. This is like overall idea. What is a service oriented architecture? What is service consumer? What is service provider? What is the role of UDDI? I hope those things are clear. Then what are the different nature of communication, right? So my next class will be focused on XML, right? And I have not talked about some jargons like orchestration. Yeah, so before I end my session, I'll talk about orchestration also. And then in the next session, we will start talking about XML, right? XML is a very, very important piece because a lot of files in Oracle SOA are generated in XML format. And until you understand XML, you cannot interpret those files, what are those trying to convey. And sometimes we need to tweak those files for our custom requirements. So here when I say XML, I'll be talking about XSD, WSDL, XPath, XSLT in very much detail. First, we'll start with XSD WSDL, and then XPath XSLT will touch when we start doing the implementations. Once we are good with this, we'll talk about the installation. So I typically don't recommend anyone to rely on some Linux box or some subscription from myself or K21 Academy, right? All of you should do this installation in your own machine, right? So there is an installation guide which is already available on the portal, right? So I believe all of you have got the access to the K21 Academy learning management system. So they have got a portal which is accessible over the web, and you might have received some credentials also. So there you should find this installation guide, and you can install Oracle SOA 12.2.13. So I will use, I'm not sure which version I have in my machine, but yes, you can get the latest one. I think it should 12.2.13 you can get. I'm not sure if we got anything after this, but whatever is the latest one, you can install it. More or less, these things are same with few bug fixes and some additional functionalities coming in the latest versions. So that guide should help you. But then if you're getting stuck somewhere, I am on that WhatsApp group. You can ping me on the WhatsApp. I'll help you. So let's make sure by the time we start the hands-on, all of us have this installation done. Okay. So do not wait for my next session to ask your questions on the installation. You can always ping me on WhatsApp. I may not respond immediately, but then I'll make sure that I spend some time for you to resolve that issue. Right? Once we have this, we'll start with the hands-on, and hands-on we are going to touch, I mean, almost everything which is required to know for Oracle SOA guy, right? I mean, after my session, you can become as good as someone who has worked in Oracle SOA for, I would say, 3 to 4 years for sure, provided that you
Uh,
do all these hands-on along with me.
Sumit,
Mm-hmm.
for example, in my PC, in my system, I already had installed actually my domain is Identity and Access Management, so Oracle Identity Manager, which I already installed using VirtualBox. So will it? It's already having its own WebLogic and so on. So will I install again a next installation of this WebLogic and all?
No.
So will it affect my previous one?
No, so you can have two installation. It doesn't impact. So I have almost 7 or 8 installations of Oracle SOA in my laptop. It doesn't impact. But then, if everything is there in place, you need not to do a new installation. If you see SOA is also available over there, then you can leverage the same one.
Okay, but it is 11G actually, all the
So
installation
then,
which I.
yeah. So get a 12C one. It's not going to impact. Okay, just make sure that your home directories are different, right? So
So can
make
I do one thing? Like I can install a new one another Linux and I will install the same again like from scratch.
yeah, you can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Even if you have Windows machine, I mean, you can install even there. It's up to you.
Okay, it will not affect any host file and all. We need to configure some
No,
host file for that.
no,
Okay,
nothing, nothing.
okay.
Okay, so guys, I'll talk about the last, jargon which you will come across very frequently as long as you're working in the integration industry. That is called as orchestration. Okay, so Oracle SOA is very, very famous for orchestration, right? I think it has got one of the finest engines to do the orchestration. So orchestration comes from word orchestra, right? And orchestra, like what happens is there are different musicians, right? Some people, some there is a group of people, and some of them might be playing a guitar, some of them might be playing a piano and tabla and so on. And there is a central coordinator, a guy who controls over them or who gives the directions to them rather. Okay, so what happens is similar thing is happens in in Oracle SOA Suite. In Oracle SOA Suite, there is a component called as BPEL. Okay, and BPEL stands for Business Process Execution Language. So coming back to the concept or the explanation of the jargon, that orchestra has different musicians and there is a central coordinator, a guy who coordinates with all of these musicians to get the right music, right? Who tells them what should be the pitch and all those things. So similarly, what happens is, whenever we are doing integrations, whenever we are designing this business use cases, business workflows, so there is a need of coordination among the different services which are built using the service-oriented architecture. So there has to be a coordinated invocation of all these services to achieve the required business functionality. So that is done in Oracle SOA Suite with the help of a component called as BPEL. So BPEL is the one which is going to coordinate with all the services to get the desired output. So what I would say is orchestration is the process of combining discrete set of services into single unit. So as somebody was asking me like about encapsulation, right? So now there are n number of discrete services which in itself is producing some functionality, but then those are required to be collaborated together so that they help in achieving a desired business use case. So then there comes the need of orchestrator. So Beeple is the orchestrator used in Oracle Source Suite, which will help you to do the collaboration among different services. These different services which are being collaborated do not need to know about each other, do not need to know the location of each other. It is only orchestrator, which is Beeple, who needs to know about all these different entities or all these different services which are required to be collaborated, right? And then there is something called as web service choreography. I want you guys to read about it, and then maybe someone of you can explain about it. So nobody is going to ask it, but then when you get into more depth, then it's something which is good to know. There is something called as orchestrator, where we have a central coordinator. So that central coordinator is going to manage it. But then there is something called as web service choreography, right? So I want you people to read it, and then we can talk about it in the next session.
Thanks, Sumit.
Any questions from anyone?
Yes, it's just one question, like regarding the synchronous, asynchronous, and one way. Like I understood regarding the synchronous and the one way. Like, can you just give one example for asynchronous? I mean,
Yeah,
let's say for
asynchronous example.
yeah,
Yeah, synchronous you understand, right? So in
yeah,
synchronous maybe that, let's say you want to retrieve your order details, right? You go to a e-commerce portal, you place an order a couple of days back, and now you have an order ID, and using that order ID you want to retrieve the details, right? Now an
yes,
example of asynchronous is you are working in your office and you raise a request for a leave, right? So does your leave get approved immediately? It goes into the work list of your manager, and it is waiting for some action on your manager, right? Or another example I can give is, so I am based in India and I have never traveled. I really don't like to travel. So I will talk in terms of the Indian context. So in India, when you do the transactions using different banks, so there are options like IMPS, NEFT,
right,
RTGS, right? Right. So when you do a NEFT, your money doesn't get transferred immediately, right? It takes
right.
some time, right? So there are some batches which are running after every 4 or 5 hours, which transfer. So you initiated a request, but do you get the response? You do not get the response immediately, right? After maybe 4 hours, you might get a message which says that the money has got credited into the recipient's account, right? But when you do
Correct.
IMPS, you may get an immediate response that the money has been credited. And so in case of asynchronous, you get an acknowledgement that the bank has received the request, but then the transaction or the complete workflow hasn't got completed at the same time. It is a delayed one, right?
Okay, so can we like on SOAP or JMS we can use the asynchronous one also?
Yes, yes. So typically when we do the asynchronous communications, your message oriented middleware, your queues have a very significant role to play, about which we will talk in coming sessions. uh, like JMS. JMS is a specification, but then you have different types of queues, like ActiveMQ, Apache, Kafka, and you have RabbitMQ. These all have a very significant role to play in your asynchronous communication.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks a lot.